and connecting cities. In short, connecting the world. That's what we're here for. That's what aviation, air travel, and tourism are all about. And the impact of those connections is that people get to explore and expand their self-determination. Determination to trade, determination to do business, determination to educate themselves, to get better healthcare, to explore, for adventure, for tourism, for culture, and so many, many more. This is what aviation is all about, and this is what its proposition has been to the world. But of course, the pandemic severely dented that, severely impacted that. And this is not just for aviation, but for the entire travel and tourism chain. Every single player in that chain has been affected severely in one way or another. And I'm just going to go into those statistics while we wait for the slides. It would be great to show them as I'm talking through them, but I don't see them up yet. So let's just start talking about that. Before the pandemic, we heard the minister, Honorable Minister of Transport in Ethiopia, mentioned the great contribution of aviation to both GDP and jobs in Africa. 7.7 million jobs and about 63 billion in GDP. Since the pandemic, we are seeing that those statistics are at risk, severely at risk. In terms of, so we can go to the next slide, slide 39 for you, Maureen. So because exactly, the pandemic led to a loss of connections, and that's what we're showing in that map there. And that loss of connections impacted Africa in this way, where we saw a risk to the 7.7 million jobs that aviation contributed in 2019 to about a risk of 5 million, meaning 5 million people, Africans, being without their livelihood, and a dent of over $32 billion to the GDP of the continent as a whole. From the airline side, the losses are massive. We had been reporting 6 billion loss, a very conservative estimate of losses for African airlines, and our revised forecast in April, it's showing that that's about 8 billion now, 7.8 billion actually in passenger revenue loss for 2020. That amounted to $42 per ticket, and in 2020, and in 2021, we're going to see about $30 per ticket, with only a return of 40% of 2019 levels in terms of passenger numbers. Tourism did not fare any better. If we go to the next slide, we saw a plunge in tourism numbers in terms of international tourism arrivals across the world of 74%, but also for Africa of 74%. And this was even made worse in January, going down to 86% in Africa. This is the worst crisis that the tourism industry has seen in a long time. If we can move the slides a bit quicker, that would be great, so we can talk through them. Exactly, those are those slides for tourism. And of course, the January issue, these are some of the things that arose as a result of new fares due to new variants and new border closures. So that meant that we were severely impacted as an industry. As I mentioned, travel and tourism connect people, and the vehicle for those connections are airlines. And as a result of the pandemic, we saw failures of African airlines. We saw failures all around the world. In particular, you can see North Latin America, where they had quite a big one, and one of the oldest carriers in the world, 100 years old, Aviation, had to go into administration. But on the Africa side, we had 7 who are listed there, but an additional 3 who are going through a restructuring. So 10 airlines who are supposed to be able to move people around for travel and tourism were not, certainly have dropped off. That also means that in terms of the ability of airlines to continue to sustain themselves, there's a lot of financial strain and financial pressure, with cash burn, airlines really bleeding on this issue. We saw a total of $2.7 billion received from 15 African countries to support the aviation sector, not just airlines, but also the wider sector, including tourism, specifically from countries like Senegal, who looked at the holistic picture, Cote d'Ivoire, and so on. But out of that money, going to the next slide, even 2.65 billion of that was in one form of relief or aid or the other, but 68% is reimbursable to the government, meaning it adds to the debts of the airlines. When you go up further, you now think, okay, what does this all mean? Well, it's important for us to get flying again. And we've heard this from all of the speakers that we've had so far, and also from one of the airlines, Ethiopian Airways. It's important for the world to start connecting again. We understand the concerns about safety and about the health and lives of people. However, there has to be a balance that we find between keeping borders closed and keeping them open in order that the world can continue to function as it has. And so the key message on that is that, waiting for the whole world to be rolled out to up to 60% or above that, or herd immunity, is not really an option, because that is going to take a long time for Africa, and I'll show you in the next slide. The air travel environment is safe. We've tried to make it as safe as possible with multiple biosecurity measures and a call for systematic pre-departure testing. Quarantine is costly to run, and it is, basically a halt on travel, and home isolation has been proven ineffective, and there's science behind this. So the practical steps that we're looking for are, looking at a complete package of mitigation measures, using the most rapid and cost-effective tests available, and using data and digitalization to support the issue of health credentials and verification. Moving to the next slide, we will see this shows, if we can move quickly, 2 more slides, please. We can move down a few more slides. Yes, thank you very much. We can see here, this picture shows it all. Africa is going to be vaccinated compared to the rest of the world. That huge percentage we're not going to see until 2023 onwards. So looking and waiting for vaccinations to be completed before countries open up meaningfully remains a challenge. What do we want? Let's go into it now. There are incentives that can support both air travel and tourism. Governments and other stakeholders are enjoined to support the industry, not just in terms of direct and indirect cash, but also through subsidization of routes, incentives for flights and seats, and advance payments of vouchers, passenger travel subsidies. For the government, it improves the affordability of travel and increases demand, and also improves connections. And for the airlines and the traveler, it also supports, the ability to get those connections going. Our final message in our last slide is the recommendations for restarting aviation. What do we want here? In the short term, we want that continued support to the industry, both for aviation and for tourism. I know that the hotel industry is absolutely devastated as well, and has seen a horrible depression from this pandemic. And I'm sure our colleagues on tourism will talk to that. We also want the most cost-effective and most rapid tests to be used by travelers, by states, endorsed by states, so that travelers can freely move across regions. And we want partnership with industry and governments in order to facilitate this movement. In the medium term, the wider use of digitalization for travelers' health credentials through different forms of travel passes. We know that the African Union has one, IATA has one, and several others, and how we integrate and ensure that there's a harmonized, trusted framework and interoperability of those platforms. And also vaccine distribution and rollout, how we as an industry can support that. And the great example we heard from Ethiopian on what they did supporting the pandemic during the height of its crisis. In the longer term, we're calling as well for continued policy adherence, which is on SATAM, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and Free Movement Protocol, and a favorable operating environment. So this is just a scene setter to talk about a summary of what we've heard so far during the course of this convention, and to set the scene for what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to go straight into it. My first question to each of the panelists, And you know, all of you have about 2 or 3 minutes to speak to the point, is what does air travel and tourism sustainability mean to you? And what are the constraints or challenges to the growth of that air travel sustainability? So let us start now with our host, Afra. Over to you.
Thank you, Funke. Airlines sustainability has been a concern for many years, even before the COVID-19. For many consecutive years, African airlines have been posting losses. And we have seen that many airlines are created and they are disappearing less than 10 years after less than 10 years operation. The reason being they are facing a lot of challenges which are hampering their performance. And the main challenge is the high cost environment. For sustainability, I think also safety enhancement is something very critical for the industry. And I take here the occasion to congratulate the African Civil Aviation Commission and the African Development Bank for the initiative to enhance safety in Africa. And AFRA is happy to work on this project with IATA. The purpose is to assist our airlines to get IOSA or ISSA certification. The COVID-19 pandemic is the most recent challenge also faced by our airlines. We all know that the potential for growth exists. It's critical to make air travel affordable for African citizens. In addition, we think African airlines need to cooperate more to share capacities, reduce costs, increase revenues, and also we need all the industry players, the authorities, the government, we really need to hand on hand to work together for the sustainability of our industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And those were very insightful comments. You know, packed a lot in the 2 minutes you had. Thank you for the great use of time. A continued focus on safety, affordability for the travelers, cooperation for efficiency and cost reduction. Those are really key points. Now, let's continue with the aviation value chain. The airports and the airlines have a symbiotic relationship. Let's hear from you, Ali. What does it mean, air travel and sustainability? What's the meaning for you, and what are the challenges to the growth of sustainability in Africa?
Okay, thank you, Adefunke. In fact, you have very well summarized the situation of air transport industry in Africa. And I can fully agree with you that our industry is plagued with a number of constraints affecting sustainability, and those concerning airports related to a number of factors such as limited licensed or certified airports, poor safety and security records, obsolete or deficient airport infrastructure, inability to embrace technology and innovation, and the lack of qualified aviation personnel, among others. For years now, AC Africa is committed to working with the airport industry on the continent to bridge the non-compliance gaps in order to achieve the requested standards and best practices to ensure the delivery of safe, secure, quality service to air travelers. Notwithstanding what I have just said, and despite the laudable initiative of Yamoussoukro decision, which previously encouraging 44 African states committing to the same, but with the very subdued success thereafter. I believe that the biggest hurdle to a sustainable air travel industry in Africa has been and is still the lack of air access liberalization and limited deregulation of air services, leading to poor domestic, intra-Africa and intercontinental traffic. Aeropolitical restriction lack of consistency in air access policy among states, and the protectionism practiced by many states are just hindering the air transport liberalization. In fact, I firmly believe that to ensure the sustainability of the air transport industry in Africa, there is need for a strong political will to remove all these barriers currently associated with air access liberalization in Africa. We have now high hopes that the democratization of our air transport industry will be spearheaded by the SATAM initiative that is designed to give a fresh impetus to the liberalization of air access in Africa, and which eventually will lead to the full implementation of the Yamoussoukro decision. Thank you.
Excellent, Ali. Thank you so much. Also, very well used time and packed a lot of interesting information and insightful information. Licensing issues, obsolete and deficient infrastructure, lack of the right skilled staff and the pipeline for them are some of the challenges that the airports are facing today. There is a lot of work being done by yourselves and other partners, but one of the biggest hurdles to air transport sustainability remains the lack of progress with air service liberalization. And this is an issue that you're calling for states to have strong political will to remove all the barriers as well as democratization. Thank you for those excellent comments. Bonnie, over to you now. Air service provider, the planes cannot fly if you don't give them the lanes and the access to do that. But we also want to hear from you. What are those, what does it mean to you? And what are those constraints or challenges to sustainability?
Thank you very much, Funke. From a navigation service provision point of view, the fundamental thing is safety of the airspace. Safe, seamless, and efficient. We need for sustainability, we need to embrace the future emerging technologies. We need to ensure that drones have a safe and are acceptable in the airspace. That's ensuring sustainability. The airspace has to be efficient, and it should ensure that finally it's affordable for the flying public to fly. In that way, we have to ensure that we are efficient. The flight levels we are affording to the airlines is ensuring that they save fuel and they are able to reduce costs, which will finally go to the flying public. Now, in terms of the constraints, the main one is the funding model. That's the fundamental one. The way we are funded, it poses a challenge to most navigation services. And then it also then going to the impact of COVID-19. We've had variable air traffic levels. The air traffic levels have increased, but we needed to ensure that the air traffic movement is still happening because of we had to ensure that the flying takes place. We have training issues which are linked to that, currency issues of our staff, mental fatigue. I mean, we are all fatigued with COVID-19. And then there's also return of to the office of the staff, given the fact that we had reduced the level, that also impact on training levels. And then I've said again, the productivity levels is important. It's a constraint that we have. And we also have lots of health consideration of our employees, which we need to take place. Thank you very much, Frankie.
Thank you, Bonnie. A safe, seamless, and efficient airspace is fundamental to sustainability and also to cost reduction. Embracing future technology is critical, and funding remains a critical challenge in this area in particular, as well as human factors. We'll go into that in a bit more detail. Elsia, let's hear from you now. You're our counterpart, our sister from the other side of the river, tourism. Many times, you know, we talk about air travel, air tourism, and sometimes, you know, we don't collaborate as closely as we would like to, but we have been doing a lot more of that over the past few years, particularly in Africa. So we'd like to hear from you, you know, what does it mean for you? What does air travel and tourism sustainability mean? And what are the constraints and challenges to that sustainability?
Thank you, Adefunke. I want also to thank AFRA for inviting us, especially in this space, as you rightly mentioned, that tourism has a key role to play in the travel industry. And maybe I would like to start by saying, as you rightly said, we've made quite a number of strides in the last few years in trying to bring together these two industries. And this recalls me of 2018, when we all met together in Cabo Verde, together with ICAO. You may recall we had this very first conference where we brought ministers of tourism and transport together, and this was where issues that we're talking about today was discussed. And out of the outcome that came out of this discussion, and the action plan that was chartered for us to work towards, touches exactly on what we're talking about today in regards to having good aviation sustainability. We talk about good governance and harmonization of policies, which the colleagues also touched on before. The need to continue to promote this air connectivity, especially within the destination in Africa, and to have good destination management, having enhanced activities between both the tourism and transport industry. And more importantly, financing, as well as infrastructure development and capacity building, human capacity building, training, to have proper trained, well staff to be able to sustain the sector. And lastly, we talk about travel facilitation, because visa also is very key in everything that we will talk about within the transport sector. But I would also like to underline here that for us, climate change also still remains a big challenge, because we know that the airline industry, I know I'm amongst aviators here, but you are a big producer of the CO2 emissions as well. And this has a direct impact on the tourism sector, especially on the local communities, and knowing that tourism in Africa is mostly on the nature-based tourism. So we really need to work towards finding the fine line between these two situations. And also, you mentioned to talk a little bit about what we think of the growth, the prospect. You showed the figures also earlier in regards to where we are with this pandemic, especially in terms of arrivals. I recall pre-pandemic UNWTO, we had recorded 71 million in terms of visitor arrivals on the continent. But unfortunately, with this year, we have seen already a huge drop of 85% in terms of international arrivals into the continent. And this immediately translates to loss of jobs, communities being impacted and affected. And so there is still a lot for us to do. As you say, where we're not that close before, but now we have to even work closer together to be able to get out of the current situation that we are living in, that has been brought by this pandemic. And I think this is what we've been seeing transpiring throughout the past year and this year. And also our Secretary General has been advocating from the very get-go that not only to restart the sector, but to have this strong cooperation and collaboration amongst the different stakeholders.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Elsia. Air transport and travel sustainability to you means creating the right linkages between travel and tourism. Also working on action plans that were developed a few years ago, focusing on good governance, harmonization, continued promotion of intra-African connectivity through the SATAM, destination marketing, destination Africa, Africa being a place for Africans to travel to and for other people to come to, capacity development, both for people and for funds, and of course, the environment. Thank you for bringing that up. Very, very important. Now, what I'm hearing from all of you is different points that are peculiar to your subsectors, but with the overarching message that this suggests that travel and tourism needs to work together. It is an ecosystem that promotes the objective and the business of connections. So let us now come to Angeline. As the policy person here, it would be good to hear from you what your own take is in terms of what is air travel and tourism sustainability, and what are some of those challenges to growth? You've heard from the players, there's specific issues for each of the subsectors of the ecosystem, but just as an overarching umbrella point, building on collaboration and the need to work together, it would be good to hear your take. Angeline, over.
Thank you, Funke. I would say from our perspective would be where the political, legislative, and the policy environment is such that it offers the ability to investors, be it government or private sector, like to invest in economic infrastructure at a level that is so necessary to ensure a globally competitive economy and enable market players to flourish economically, create businesses, create jobs, and create all sorts of benefits that comes with it. This means policymakers, therefore, have to be market survey in their responses to the needs of industry and passengers or users of those services alike, by investing in the kind of infrastructure that would enable them as market participants to be more nimble, innovative, entrepreneurial, and in such a volatile and global aviation environment that we find ourselves, in order to ensure that sustainability for the industry. So what are the constraints when rules, procedures, are not harmonized, are not attuned to speaking to each other at a continental level, at a reg level, as well as national level, then it makes it very difficult, and hence this unequal pace in the implementation of liberalization and its associated accompanying measures between our countries, and the low lack of commitment to implement YD consistently, as well as to implement what they have signed up to. Taxes, charges, and fees for green on aviation in Africa are above world average levels and accounting for a great portion of fair prices, even as airlines' operating costs are very high, mainly due to the high exogenous costs that are imposed on them. Restrictive visa policies, again, if not harmonized at all these different layers, are barriers to air connectivity as well as tourism to flourish. Then we have limited infrastructure development, for example. I remember many years ago when going to a border between Canada and the US, where there was no fence and they shared a border facility, for example. Then I saw another different story experience between Mexico and the US again. So we don't necessarily have to have the same skylines, the same level of infrastructural development in our cities. But if we have those things that are key, like the stakeholders just mentioned, border facilities, we speak to each other and we're able to facilitate a traffic flow, I believe we will do a long way addressing the constraints that we are facing and making the single African air transport market work as it should. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angeline. A favorable political, legislative, and policy environment are integral to air travel and transport sustainability, and they are enablers for competitiveness and for the market to flourish and everyone to benefit. These are very valid points. Some of those constraints are the lack of harmonization that we've talked about and the lack of commitment to implement. So I'm going to stay with you on that, Angeline, and ask what you think as the policy and as the executing agency for civil aviation across the whole continent of Africa, what do you think can be done on those two issues, harmonization and lack of commitment by states?
I believe we have gone a long way in releasing studies after studies to show the benefits of being part of a single African transport market. We have seen it work elsewhere in other parts of the world, and I believe it could equally work for us. What we need to do, obviously, is to unpack what these benefits are and what we are foregoing, continuing to delay this implementation. I mean, when policymakers sit at a table negotiating, it is not only about their jobs. We must think, for example, of jobs created by others coming into our markets. A very good example would be the Airbus Beluga, how huge it is. When we look at the African airspace, I mean, ours is very complex, it's very fragmented. Different flight information regions exist, but we can coexist. So when jobs are created in Namibia or elsewhere, it should not matter who creates the job, but are jobs created. And if we are committed to that, it would not matter at what level of the region of the African continent jobs are going to. I mean, this is an aircraft that is assembled in the UK, for example, and built elsewhere. And the design is elsewhere, but still within the same confined space. So I believe if we start to talk to each other and see that a benefit foregone elsewhere is actually tripled elsewhere within the African Union, within the African region, I think that would make countries to start to see that Lesotho may be a small part within South Africa, but it has unique abilities to enhance that immediate market. And so the Gambia within Senegal. So I believe each one of us have got a unique, or states have got a uniqueness that they bring to the table. And that has to be amplified more clearly so that people can see that, you know, it's a win-win for all of us. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you very much. That's a very good point that I want to highlight here, what you're just saying, that, you know, and I think it borrows from what we heard the CEO of Ethiopian Airlines say during the interview, that we need to see each other as Africans, as brothers and sisters, trusting each other and working together for the common good of the continent and for the common good of the peoples of Africa. I think that's a very important point. However, there are some political constraints to that, you know, issues around sovereignty of state and so on, and issues around trust. These are very important points, but your recommendation here is for continued advocacy, not just to look at the benefits alone, but to look at what is being foregone. I think that's a very important thing. And maybe an example to illustrate that is when we hear that out of 1.3 billion Africans, only about 100 million travel by air. Okay, so it says, oh, okay, that's maybe 10%. Is that 10%? Okay. So, but if you say the other way and say, out of 1.3 billion Africans, 90% of them are denied access to air travel and tourism. Then it's a whole different ballgame, because it's not just looking at what the benefits are, but it's looking at what is being foregone. So that's a very important point. Thank you for that. We're getting some questions from the floor, and I'm going to interject as we go along with some of those questions. But let me go into another point very quickly with all of you. And this is just a very quick one. It's like a round robin for all of you. You know, what is your number one immediate priority right now in terms of restarting the industry and ensuring that air travel and tourism recovers? What is the number one priority for you? Ali, let me start with you.
Thank you, Adefunke. In fact, just quickly, our only hope for the time being is vaccination, and Africa urgently needs to catch up with the vaccination campaign. Initially, Africa targeted to vaccinate at least 30% of the 1.34 billion of its population by the end of this year, rising up 60% or higher just after. but supply constraint, logistical problem, and reluctance to vaccinate leads to very low vaccination rate. We have, therefore, a long way to go to reach the target of 30% by the end of this year and to catch up with many regions of the world. So in the absence of a massive vaccination and in order to ensure sustained recovery while guaranteeing safety health of travelers, health authorities in Africa should coordinate their health procedure to facilitate travel journey and restore confidence in the air transport. The establishment of an interoperable health data trust framework is needed to facilitate safe border reopening and the cross-border level. Technology tools such as the health passport or any other reliable system can facilitate this procedure. So, as such, ACI Africa is supportive of any system which allow testing and vaccination data to be shared consistently, efficiently, and in a way to protect the personal data of those that will use it. Thank you.
Excellent, Ali. While we wait for the vaccination to catch up and roll out across AFI, let us use technology. Let us use technology to support interoperability, mutual trust, and coordination of health border protocols and controls. Great point there. Okay, let me go to you, SG Afra.
Yes, thank you, Funke. I'll be very brief. The restart, in my view, depend on three parameters, and these three parameters should be considered as one priority. First, the financial support to air travel sector by government and financial institutions. Second, harmonization of health measures and the reduction of PCR tests across the continent. Third, accelerating vaccine rollout on the continent to reach herd immunity as soon as possible. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Great points there. I mean, I couldn't have said it better, so I will not even go into that to repeat it. Elsia, how about you?
Yes, from our side, I join the colleagues as well. I think restoring confidence and ensuring harmonization is key in this process because, as I mentioned earlier, from the very beginning, at the outset of the pandemic, through our Global Crisis Committee, which is led by our Secretary General, this is a committee that brings together both the public and the private sector, as well as other international organizations and other UN agencies. They have been continuously addressing the key challenges that are standing in the way of tourism restarts. But at the same time, they've been looking at the need for coordination and the need to restore confidence in travel. And in their last meeting, this committee, they had advanced plans on the International Code for the Protection of Tourists, because this is a legal code that helps to reassure tourists, and it also gives them that extra protection as consumers. And you just mentioned also at the beginning, through our collaboration with IATA, we've put in this new destination tracker that has been launched. And it provides updated and trusted data on regulations of destinations and airlines, because we know in this point in time, trusted data will mean also trust in travel again. And maintaining that trust and confidence is key, because if you keep sending mixed messages, especially what in some instances we've been seeing about around the vaccination, this would damage the confidence, and this would also delay the restart of our tourism sector. So concerns around data protection and privacy, it's inevitable and it's understandable. So governments, as well as international organizations and the private sector, we need to reorganize this and proactively work towards reassuring the public. Again, I stress here, consistency, coordination is essential. Vaccination also is key in this. It's not the ultimate, but it's part of the process. And we said that, I joined Mr. Tunsi in saying that the vaccine certificates needs to be interoperable as well as recognized across the different borders. Example in case could be setting up a work system between a few countries, and this could be as an example for the rest to follow, as he mentioned about the vaccination pass, etc. But as I mentioned, the vaccines are being rolled out at different speeds. It is part of the solution, but we also have to keep working together, and that is why we have been advocating for accessible and inclusive tourism for all, so that even if the vaccination should not be the sole permit for entry to tourists, but at least we keep on working together, because we need to restart the sector.
Absolutely. All right. So consistency and coordination are key to restoring the sector and also restoring confidence for travelers, so that people can get moving again in the world. And this is really important across so many of the different elements you've mentioned there. I like the idea about having a test case, where we have different countries who are actually testing out the interoperability and the recognition and mutual trust framework for the health credentials. So that's a very important and interesting point. Thank you. Bonnie?
Thank you very much, Funke. Firstly, we have to, as air navigation service providers, we have to facilitate the transportation of the vaccines. Given the fact that, in your slide, you did show that when you look at Africa, it looked like it's going to be until 2023 when we will, if I remember, if my stat is okay. Is correct, sorry. So what we need to do, we need to reduce COVID infections among our staff to ensure that they are there in positions. We need to ensure that we are creative and come up with the remote working models, in other words, remote working management. Maintenance of staff competency, because we know that with us, there are issues of currency and all of that. We need to manage that. And then we need to manage the resources, the air traffic, as well as the resources that we have. I think that's all that I've written. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, you raised a very important point about ensuring the continued safety of the entire airspace system through maintaining the currency of staff. And this is something that also speaks to what Mr. Bette had mentioned about safety being a continued concern, and we must be absolutely obsessive about safety, especially in this period of restart. And it's not just about the aircraft maintenance, but it's also about the people who are operating these machines and the technicians and all the people who are facilitating the movement. So this is a really good point. In addition to the point about facilitating transportation of the vaccine. Maybe if we have time towards the end, I can ask USG of AFRA to comment on, if there are any movements in terms of coordinating an airline group across Africa to help support the movement of vaccines. I know, for example, in Nigeria, that some of the airlines have already supported to move goods, the vaccines across all the 36 states. That's a local example. We've heard from Ethiopian what they've done already with the PPEs, and I'm sure they're supporting as well with the vaccine, but it would be good to hear what other people have to say. Let's just finish on this question with Angeline, and then I'm going to take 2 questions from the floor before we proceed. So Angeline, your own immediate priority on how we can get back to a meaningful restart of the entire system.
Our focus at AFCAC level is a multilateral sectoral approach, because we recognize that we have different strengths institutionally as well as technically, and we need to talk to each other, collaborate and coordinate each other's effort. Capacity building of senior executives who would be able to translate what we said is too high attacks or unrelated attacks into something that works and that everybody can identify with, so that we can communicate and create a robust mechanism to comprehensively address the complexities now around the impact of COVID on the industry. We are set to mobilize member states, partners, international organizations, and major stakeholders to ensure that we reach a global consensus on the multilateral approach and try to find political goodwill of states to enable industry to a safe and efficient recovery of the African aviation system, and to rebuild our strength on the foundations of a very resilient African aviation market. So we'll continue to promote and support common positions, even on the issue of vaccine passports being imposed by some states as a prerequisite for air travel, so that it doesn't hurt air travel in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very important. The multilateral approach, but also the sectoral approach. So multilateralism for Africa would really change the game, wouldn't it? And that's one of the tenets of the SATAM, you know, having a single African market, almost a Pan-African domestic market, as well as the African Continental Free Trade Area, as well as the free movement people. That's what it's all about. These policy underpinnings of the African Union support a multilateral system. And then the sectoral approach, you know, where we all come together with our different strengths and leverage on that and see how we can support each other for the greater good. I think these are very important points. Thank you very much indeed. Now I'm going to ask a question now. Regarding, just a second, I had a question for which I will start with Angeline again, and then I'll hand over to Elsia. Somebody from the floor said that we have AFCAC, who's handling open skies and implementation of SATAM. We have the AFCFTA Secretariat, who's handling the free trade area. So the question is, who is in charge of free movement of people? So let's start with you, Angeline, because again, we're all supposed to be speaking together, and these are not supposed to be independent policy initiatives, but working together to achieve the objective of, you know, a more united, prosperous, and integrated Africa. So what are the movements, if any, on this issue? And then maybe I'll talk to Elsie as well. Very quickly, please.
In this regard, we obviously support the African Free Trade Secretariat because they are the ones that mobilize or galvanize the states at the level that we support in terms of the safety and security measures that we assist states with in order to have a conducive environment, because there's no point in not having a conducive environment for this kind of business to flourish. So I would say it's more within their ambit, but we are there to support as a sister agency like that.
Okay, so if I could read that in two ways, Angeline, I could read that to mean, yes, you know, there's work going on and you're involved. I could also read that to mean that you're not quite, you know, as involved as you may like to be, especially how the linkages would be to support the SATAM implementation. So we don't know what we don't know, right? Go ahead.
I mean, we are involved in the multi-sectoral task force that is now currently led by AU CDC.
Okay.
Of vaccine.
Okay, great.
And that is to facilitate travel and to enable people to move between borders. So we are there, in fact, we co-chair that task force.
That task force. Okay, great. Thank you. Elsia, on the issue of people, is there anything you can share with us, any work that's going on there that you might be involved in, or any information that you can use to enlighten us on what's happening?
Can you repeat the first part because there were some interruptions?
Yes, the free movement of people. The free movement of people. Yeah.
I think under this point, what I can tell you is that UNWTO has always been advocating for flexible visa regimes as well as tax exemptions, and we've been encouraging our countries to move towards issuing, for example, visa upon arrivals. And if you look at our visa openness report for 2019, for example, Africa, it includes the analysis of visa policies and progress that has been made in visa facilitation over the past 10 years. And this was one of the core topic issues that was discussed also at the ICAO, UNWTO ICAO meeting in Cabo Verde. And it's part of the action plan to really look at travel facilitation. And we've always been pushing for visa policies to be facilitated. And again, as I said, if you look at our report, 53% of the world's population was required to obtain a traditional visa before their international journey. Another 10% was allowed to apply for an e-visa, while 16% were able to apply for a visa on arrival. So only 21% of the world's population did not require a visa when traveling for tourism purposes. But when we look at how the world population has been affected by traditional visa requirements, our report also shows that it has decreased by 22 percentage points between 1980 and 2018, from 75 to 53%. So we've always been advocating for this, to move from visa on arrival to e-visa, to facilitate the movement of travel and also between borders. I think there are some initiatives that was supported also by the World Bank not so long ago with the Gaza region, for example, where there's the visa between that region. So these are all the different steps and approaches that together with ICAO, we've been working in synergy to continue to encourage our members.
Excellent. It is certainly a constraint, travel facilitation, but it also seems like it could be a low-hanging fruit here. It could be one of those things that we really try to move forward very quickly on to try and see how we can harmonize that. I mean, as all of you on the call are Africans, we know what we go through sometimes to get from one African country to another. And it certainly will not help the case, but this could be something that can help fast track. Angeline, before I leave you finally, there's a quick question from the floor. Victoria Moores would like to know, we heard recently that Zambia has just joined, bringing us to 35 countries on the SATAM. She'd like to know what it is that we're doing to get additional states on. This could be a good opportunity to talk about, the study that we're going to launch in the coming months to support advocacy for states. And then I will move to the other participants to speak on similar initiatives that the industry is working on, any joint collaborative efforts or approaches that any of you are working on together. So ACI, Kanzo, Afra, Ayata, and so on. So just very quickly on the SATAM states, Angeline, and then we'll move on. Thanks.
Our advocacy program is obviously had suffered a setback last year, but we will continue with stakeholders. I mean, we all have joint meetings. We to states and we facilitate with the AUC. Whenever we know of a state, we facilitate that process like we did with Zambia. But we will continue. It's a continuous, let me rather say, it's like a marathon that will never finishes, because our objective is to have all 54 states subscribe to something.
Okay, so do we have a few more states in that pipeline now? That are a few more states in the pipeline that are scheduled to come on board?
No, not that we know of, but we know that we plan to collaborate, for example, with COMESA. We signed an MOU, and we would, because they also have got certain objectives to strengthen the single African trust market within the COMESA region. So as a result, we are planning towards, but it's still in the initial stages, and it's not something that I should divulge now, but we will be collaborating with REX at all levels. We will be collaborating with states at individual levels, as well as use these forums to continue to advocate. So, and SADC, for example, is meeting tomorrow. We will be a presentation there for two SADC states to just give them some feedback where we are, and as well as the subscription within their own states. So those are the kinds of things that we usually will do.
Okay, that's very useful. Thank you very much. Now let's talk about, how this ecosystem is working together. We've all been affected. Every single person, even the states themselves, are affected. So generally, I'd like everyone to just talk about any examples, very quick ones of any initiatives that we're working together on, or you're working with any other part of the ecosystem on. We heard Elsia mention earlier the joint destination tracker that was jointly developed with UNWTO and IATA, and that's a very useful resource. I am sure that the Secretariat of AFRA will provide the link to that so everyone can go and see what it looks like, and it's very, very useful and to put passengers' minds at rest. SG of AFRA, you had also mentioned the collaborative work we're doing with AFCAC and IATA and AFRA on safety. If you want to add any other examples, that would be good, and then we can hear from Bonnie, and then finally Ali. Ali, I'm going to end it with you because you also have a question that's specific to ACI. So let's do it that way. So next, AFRA SG, Bonnie, and then we go to Ali.
Yes, Funke, what is the question?
Any examples, any other examples of collaboration across the value chain?
Oh, yes. I mentioned the safety collaboration we have with you. Yes. And I can mention also we have signed recently a memorandum of understanding with ACI Africa. And this is very important because we want to put in place a framework of strengthening our cooperation. We have been in discussion also with UNWTO, and we'll very soon sign another memorandum of understanding, because we think really that we need, all sectors need to work together. And also, of course, we have all been working under the leadership of the African Civil Aviation Commission since the beginning of the pandemic, and we will continue to do so. And there are a lot of regulatory documents which are being prepared by African Union Commission and the African Civil Aviation Commission, and of course AFRA and all stakeholders will be part of them to give their input. It's very, very important to continue working together for the sustainability of our industry, and of course with also the tourism sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bonnie?
Thank you very much, Funke. I'll just mention two. Air Traffic Mombasa ATFM roadmap. There we involving airlines, airports, and air navigation service providers. It's actually the whole value chain, because it's about air traffic flow management. The second one which we're doing is the one that we're doing with IATA. It's an action group, a group on aeronautical information management. In fact, we had a meeting yesterday, the action group meeting, which looks at the NOTAMs, you know, how and when and how do we coordinate and how do we communicate before we issue out NOTAMs. Those are the two which I can think of, you know, in my hands.
Okay, thank you. Now, Ali, if you can share some examples with us and then answer the question from the floor that says, what success have you as ACI had in terms of getting financial support for your members who have lost revenue due to the pandemic? They say they've heard about some of the pledge support from states for airlines, but what about airports, and how is ACI lobbying for that? So we'll start first with your example of collaboration and then answering this question. And please, the rest of our panelists, please start thinking about your final word, because we'll be wrapping up now. I think we have only a few minutes left. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Adefunke. In fact, the ACI Africa remain focused and united with the other stakeholders in the call for government to partner with the industry to prepare to restart globally a global connectivity when the pandemic situation allows, and unprecedented global vaccination efforts offered a beacon of hope that to return to normally is a possibility in the future, in the near future. So that we are ready to cooperate and partner with any stakeholders for the restart. And in other notes, as Abdurrahman said, we are pleased to announce our recent formal partnership with AFRA to mutually support each other in the development of a safe and durable air transport industry in Africa through a number of collaborative efforts and actions. So this is about collaboration and action. About lobbying of ACI Africa to support its member, just to note that most of the airports in Africa are owned by government or by company managed by government. So it's direct support of the government to airports. We didn't speak a lot about, but we know that there is a lot of loss of money, but we never declare bankruptcy of airports or administration of airports, because most of them are owned by government and directly supported by government. But ACI, as I said, continue to lobby for them, to support them, mainly to support skills, because for a period of time with no activities, people lose their knowledge, and we create big program to support staff for the recovery by mainly training and online training, and if possible in job training. So this is just to summarize very fastly.
Okay, good. I think we only have a few minutes left. I'm glad that I haven't yet been given any warning by the hosts. So that thing means we're doing well for time. So we have, you know, a moment for our final thoughts. If we were to turn today's discussion into, you know, a clear action plan, you know, what will it be in order to yield tangible results? You know, we have a lot of these engagements, tangible results, you know, that can move the needle, even if it's just one thing. What would be your final word? What is that action that you believe that can be taken to move us from where we were yesterday to where we need to be going forward? So any one of you can start. I won't pick on anyone. Only 3 seconds though to start. So going.
Okay.
Let me start.
I'll start.
Okay, go
Okay.
ahead.
Ladies first.
Oh, okay. Okay, then the first one is collaboration. Collaboration within the industry, what we are doing is key, is very important. That has to continue, and we have to do more of it. Secondly is government support. Most of our ANSPs, for instance, are funded by governments. The governments have to ensure that they reinvest whatever that they're collecting. It has to be invested, and they should separate regulation and service provision so that there is proper accountability and the governance within the air navigation sector.
Excellent. Thank you very much. SG, I think you were next.
Yes, thank you. In my view, first, at the policy level, we need to continue implementation of a single African air transport market, the African continental free trade area, and the free movement of protocol. This AUC flagship project will impulse air travel growth and sustainability in Africa. And secondly, government, civil aviation, and travel players need to cooperate and adopt a collaborative approach in solving the challenges our industry is facing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I can just give a brief for 5 important issues to consider if we are to yield tangible result for our industry. Very brief. First, there is a need for a constant and sustained dialogue among African government, civil aviation authorities, tourism and travel industry players, air transport association and others stakeholders to implement, harmonized and internationally adopt health and travel protocols to bring back the necessary confidence for a safe, simple and seamless air travel in the new normal. Secondly, very fast, African states are encouraged to make available universal, accessible and affordable COVID-19 testing facilities to all air travelers like PCR or rapid antigen tests. Thirdly, it's important that the vaccine rollout campaign in Africa be expedited equally with the prime objective of achieving the herd immunity or that level of vaccination which inhibit the ability of the virus to circulate in the population. Fourthly, African states must be asked to lift prohibitive travel restrictions in the form of quarantine measures to fully vaccinated and negative tested travelers. And fifth and the last, African states must be encouraged to adopt any form of globally interoperable digital health passes or certificate approved by the World Health Organization that will seamlessly integrate into testing or travel processes of the different stakeholders or of the air travel industry. So this is very fast what priority for SAR.
Very good. Thank you so much. Elsia, we are going to end with Angeline.
Yes, I think in terms of long-term planning, we all have a very good idea of how to move forward. But I think what is critical in this time now is really to collaborate, to work in harmony for us to restart the tourism sector, because the movement of people, the challenges that we were not used to before, such as border closures in the way that we are seeing it today, it has changed so much, and that it impacts heavily on livelihoods on the ground. So if we can restart the sector, if we can work together and have quick actions, like we've seen the collaborative efforts that we've done with IATA, giving information that will help build trust and confidence. This is what we need in the immediate. Apart from all the other things that the colleagues have said, we really need to think of, yes, we have to reopen, we have to restart, because there's a lot of livelihoods that are today depending on these two sectors in rebounding. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Last and final word, and Angeline.
From Africa's perspective, in our case, we have moved our collaboration and cooperation beyond conference talks into something very tangible. With the recent launching of the African Development Bank's support to Africa, we have our partners, IATA, AFRA, and at RED level that will now implement that. This offers opportunities to states at their level to identify with us the airlines or prospective operators that can benefit from this scheme in order to get their preparation for their IOSA or ESA certification, for example. We'll continue to be a conveyor belt for information at state level and at all levels about opportunities and mobilizations where we can directly influence. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Great panel. Thank you all very much for your excellent feedback. And remember the words of the famous Kwame Nkrumah, the first president and prime minister of Ghana, when he said, divided we are weak, and united, Africa and aviation could become one of the greatest forces for good in the world and for our continent. Let's continue to work in collaboration. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Much. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you and bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much, Funke. Thank you so much for a job well done. And thank you to your panelists for having discharged this topic creditably. Now we know how we are moving forward from now.